So Aquarium Day was definitely one of the most amazing, and I really enjoyed it because as a volunteer at the Georgia Aquarium, I spend a lot of time with the fish and the sharks teaching people about them. So it was really cool to go to the aquarium at SeaWorld and see how their fish, their sharks, and some of really, really amazing reptiles were taken care of. So the first thing we did is we were working with the reef fish. So we got to go through and explore a bit of their biomes. We got to see, little clownfish exhibits with anemones and how they would have filtered tide cycles that would, give them special inflows and outflows of water to replicate their natural environment. They had cycling lights, which would mimic, obviously, the light cycles that they would encounter in their natural environment. So that was really cool. Once we moved past the reef fish, we got to see this really stunning exhibit that had some sharks in it. And what's really great about it is it has sort of an asymmetrical shape, which definitely boosted various swimming directions in sharks, because sharks, like most fish, they like to... Can you remove that, Hannah? Because that sucked. Just take out that part where I started with sharks. The asymmetrical tank is really helpful for sharks because sometimes they'll end up swimming in just one direction, around and around and around, and that will build up sort of unbalanced muscle growth. Since this was an asymmetrical tank, you got to see sharks that were encouraged to change direction very frequently, which is a really cool habitat modification that's used very frequently in animal husbandry. So getting to see everything was amazing, first of all. But then we all had the really cool opportunity to go up behind the scenes and help out with animal husbandry. So one of the first things that I got to do is I got to help feed the sharks. And if that doesn't sound amazing, then you need to get your ears checked because it was fantastic. So we worked with these giant poles. They were sort of like those things that you buy at the zoo, with the T-Rex head or whatever, and you squeeze a little trigger and it goes rah, 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 and grabs things. Except, obviously, it was a lot larger, made of metal, and the little grasper was not as cool as a T-Rex head. But, so, we would grab a fish or a chunk of fish, and we'd wait for one of the sharks to come by, because in addition to the sharks, there were also a couple of larger fish, which were very opportunistic feeders and would steal food right off the pole if we gave them the chance. So we'd wait for a shark to come over, and one of us would hold the pole. The other person would take note of which animal was swimming by based off of some individual markings. Write that down so we know which animals are eating and how much. And we'd put the pole down, smack it right in the water, right in front of the shark, and she would just come up and grab it. And the power behind that bite, you could feel it travel all the way up the pole. Sometimes I wouldn't really let go, and you would, just kind of sit there in a tug-of-war with a shark for a little bit, trying to keep your hand on the feeder pole. So that was amazing, getting to really feel the power of these animals. After that, I cycled through to the redfish feeding station because, as I mentioned, there are a couple of fish. So this station was kind of the distraction station to keep all these fish away from the feeding sharks. And we got these chunks of squid and chunks of small fish, and we would just kind of toss them over the railing, and this big swarm of little redfish would just be swarming, really, just trying to get whatever scraps of food they could. And so we all came up with this little game. We would try to drop a fish and see how fierce of splashing we could elicit from the redfish that were in the exhibit. So it was really great to see that schooling behavior and to see that competitive feeding behavior. The last bit we did is we went to feed the zebra sharks. Now, you probably just heard me mention that we were feeding the sharks already. Well, the zebra sharks are special because zebra sharks are kind of small and fragile sharks. So they had to be lured into a special holding pen, fed. They would swim out, and then we would make sure that they would come back in. Occasionally, one of the big sharks would try to get in, and the redfish were always hanging around trying to steal food. But we got the zebra sharks to eat, so it was all good. After we finished with the sharks, we got to prep food for some of the reef fish, and we got to examine some of the really cool circle tanks, but we got to see them from the top. Now, around those tanks, there were little tanks with jellies or smaller reef fish that hadn't quite been put on exhibit or were off exhibit for whatever reason. And again, we would just toss in the food, and you'd get to see that really cool swarming response. Different fish would react for different bits of food at different stages. Some fish would wait for it to filter down. Other fish would, be flopping it up and out of the water trying to grab a bite. So that was really fantastic. After the aquarium, we got to work with another set of really fascinating scaly critters, alligators. It was amazing. So what we did is we went down, and it was alligator feeding time, and we were handed sort of a bucket of alligator biscuits. Now, alligator biscuits are kind of chunks. They're about that big of compressed meat and all sorts of other things that the gators might need for their food. It actually smelled a bit like dog food, but it's very helpful because it floats, it reduces competition over chunks of meat, and it stores really well, and especially in the Texas heat where any floating meat chunks could really get really nasty very quickly. So basically, feeding gators was extremely fun. You would just grab a gator biscuit, haul back, and toss it, hopefully aim somewhere near a gator's mouth, but obviously not hitting the animals themselves. And sometimes you would just get to see the jaws open and slap down with this really big crack. It was gorgeous to see these animals. We had a couple of birds that would flit around, seeing if they could get something. Fortunately, the gators were either too lazy or just not hungry enough to go after any of them, although that would have been a sight. Sorry, Hannah, I don't remember what else we did. Give me a minute. What did we do? Chunks, fish, gator biscuits. Oh, yes. After the gators, we got wetsuited up again, and we headed down to the stingray pool, where we got to see some cow-nose rays. Now, what was really cool is that in addition to cow-nose rays, we also had a whole colony of nesting swallows that were living on the roof. Now, this is very exciting to me. I love birds. So we were watching the birds flit back and forth. So it was kind of, we were surrounded by life. You looked down and we had cow-nose rays and other stingray species. You looked up and we had all sorts of birds of the air. It was amazing. So we all donned our masks and our snorkels, and we snorkeled around them. And it was really interesting because you typically don't think of cow-nose rays as being particularly inquisitive or particularly social animals, but they were very interested in us, especially whoever had the food at any given time. But even after all the food had been dispersed, you would have rays that would swim up and sort of bump you or, twine through your legs. Very, very tactile animals, which is not something that I would have expected. So that was fantastic. We also got a chance to go behind the scenes and check out the veterinary building, where we talked to one of the veterinarians, and he told us about, how to diagnose issues with fish and rays, which is kind of tricky because a lot of veterinarians don't really focus on fish, but they need conservation, they need protection, they need medicine just as much as any charismatic killer whale or whatnot would need. So that was really exciting to learn how to really boost efficiency of husbandry for those animals. Sorry, Hannah, I forgot again. I just looked at it 5 minutes ago. It wasn't 5 minutes. You're going to have to do a lot of editing. Sorry. Okay, so the last thing we did that day was quite possibly one of the most looked forward events of the whole camp experience, not going to lie. We got to go see the Shamu Night Show, which I was really excited about because A, it's got really catchy music, which is great to dance to, and B, I really wanted to see what Kayukut had to offer because I had heard quite a bit from Malia, who described how there's no splash zone because Kai splashes so high even people who are outside the stadium get wet, or whatever. I wasn't really sure if I believed her. But so we went, and I got my cheeks all done up with fluke makeup, and, we went, and again, the music was extremely catchy. We had a lot of fun there. But we also got to see the show, and it was beautiful. It was stunning. The music, the work of the whales, fantastic. It was really cool to see little baby Kamea, so small, had no idea what she was doing, but she would follow around the big boys, Kai and Tuar, and she would just do her thing. For the more complex behaviors, the trainers would call her over to the side and they'd rub down on her or, show her enrichment items to get her excited so that she wouldn't mess up the big boys. And then came the part where we got to see Kai douse everybody. Unfortunately, we were a little bit too high up on the stands, and Kai was just warming up, so we did not get the soak that I had been anticipating from what Malia was talking about. But we did get to see the other side receive that kind of real soaking when we were watching Kai as he got more warmed up. I have to admit, my favorite part was, again, seeing Una, because she's my favorite whale, and she's adorable. And if you don't love Una, then we need to talk, because you're blind and something wrong. But that was fantastic. Just the emotion of being there with a group and having so much fun together was a great way to end our week. At the end of the show, we did, of course, get to meet the trainers, and they were very nice. We had a pop quiz. We had to name a couple of behaviors and then give the matching hand signal. So for me, since I was mostly focusing on Una, I was watching the commands that her trainer gave. So I was watching for this, which is the symbol for alien. And so I got to watch Una do a couple of those, which was gorgeous, because typically Una's what I'm getting is one of the lazier whales. She's a bit not too fond of high aerial activities, but she was going pretty high, which was very exciting for me. And of course, afterwards, we had our very nice trainer take buckets of ice cold water and dump them on us because we didn't get soaked by Kai. And next thing you know, my beautiful whale fluke makeup that Hannah so helpfully made and Taylor helped with, and so did Malia, was terribly smeared. I mean, honestly, I could have pulled off a mean Bucky Barnes cosplay, I'm telling you. So that was it. It was really a fantastic way to end the week, and, as they say, legendary.